Hey, 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 good evening, my beautiful butterflies and fly guys. Listen, we are celebrating tonight our 100th episode. That's right, we're celebrating. And listen, I'm glad you're joining us to celebrate with us. And I know you are ready to get into tonight's discussion. So without pause, let's get to it. So I want to talk to you tonight. Again, as we're celebrating our 100th episode, but I want to talk to you specifically about a topic I think that is paramount to our community and is imperative for Black men and women, by the way, to understand. And I know that many times our focus, of course, on He Spoke Fashion is on fashion and how these improvements will help you obtain the outcomes you desire. And you know what? We're going to get to that at some point, even in this discussion. But first, we must work through the nuances that will come about concerning this topic. If you're not ready for this discussion, then listen, real talk. You may want to log off right now, you feel me? Because this is a discussion that we must have if we hope to rescue our community. That's right, I said it. If we want to rescue our community, to change the trajectory of our community, and even strengthen our community, right? So many of you are familiar with the late YouTube sensation, Kevin Samuels. And although, listen, I get it, many of you did not like him or his content, there were oftentimes comments that he would make during his shows that I believe then and I believe now needed to be evaluated and discussed. Like many of you, I was unaware of who Kevin Samuels, was, but he was brought to my attention, believe me, it's a funny story, by my son, Marquise, and this was around about 2020. Shout out to Marquise. Love you, man. So nevertheless, in our conversations, Marquise would reference quotes by someone he was calling the Godfather. Now, I would oftentimes be confused because I knew that his mother and I never named any godparents for him. But I thought perhaps he had, like I have done, adopted some on his own. But during one conversation in particular, I asked him about this Godfather he spoke of. And he then shared a link to his YouTube channel. That is Kevin Samuels' YouTube channel. Now, I must admit, I wasn't interested in a lot of the content there, but there were some things that this man said that I said, we need to have this conversation, this kind of conversation in our community if we hope to better our community and our relationships with one another. And although he is not here to have it any longer, you know, his voice lives on in YouTube as well as other social media platforms in some form or another. However, I am empowered to continue to have this type of discussion. That is why tonight, as we celebrate, again, we're celebrating our 100th episode. And as we celebrate, we are discussing this topic, Kevin Samuels. Women don't want a good Black man. Was he right? Was he right? All right, this is our state of emergency. Go ahead and tag somebody. Tell Lottie Dottie and everybody that He Spoke Fashion Live is on right now. And we have a great show in store for you. That's right. Listen, we'll be right back, all right? So stay tuned. Are you ready, AB? All right, let's get it. Hit it. Yeah, in the building.
He spoke fashion. He spoke fashion.
All right. Again, thank you for joining us and taking your time, the time out of your busy schedule to have this conversation. And as I said in my opening monologue, the late Kevin Samuels made some very interesting comments during many of his shows. And you know what? If you weren't locked in, you would miss them. And instead play into some of the sensationalized content and comments that he would make and those things that would go viral. But in one instance, there was a discussion concerning relationships between modern women and high-value men. And during that discussion, he opined that women don't want a good man. They simply only want a high-value man. And that comment spoke volumes to me. Why? I'll tell you why. Because we know, and I know, that all men aren't high-value men. I'll be the first to say it. I can admit it. You know, Kevin Samuels' goal many times, in my humble opinion, was to refocus our attention on the nuclear family structure. That is why there were many who stated, and I quote, "Protect Kevin Samuels at all costs, for he is going to save the nuclear family structure and possibly end toxic feminism." Now, that's what the comment said. Now, while he may not have been championed for that, and of course he was made out to be a pariah to our community, I don't know, but perhaps people smarter than I do know why he was made out to be that way. But now to our discussion. When we look at the topic of our discussion, we must first define what a good black man is. And you know what? That may be difficult for some to do. But for me, I will start with how your favorite relationship expert defined a good black man back in 2009. That's none other than, that's right, your boy, Steve Harvey. Now, while we know that half the stuff Steve was shoveling at the time when he was telling women what to do, we know now that half of that stuff was wrong, right? Come on, we can be honest, right? But there were three things that I would like to extract from Steve in defining a good man. And those are what I consider the 3 Ps. A good man is to provide, then is to protect, and then profess. All right? Now, while those characteristics were good in that day, and the question is, do they still amount to the same in this day? Are the qualities that we determined for a good man years ago applicable today? If there are, if those things are applicable today, then our mission then becomes how we connect those who say they can't find a good man. Okay, there's those. Now, ladies, if you have a girlfriend and she's not on, and she's one of those that complains, there's no good man out here, I can't find a good man, then listen, tag her right now. She need to come before the congregation. No, I'm just kidding. I always want to say that, right? But nevertheless, if there are those that can't find a good man, we have to connect those to those who exemplify these qualities, right? That's what we need to do. But what if, for instance, the characteristics are more abstract? Then herein lies the problem with this discussion, because defining a good man may differ depending simply on whom you ask. So listen, for the sake of this conversation, I have conducted a small survey asking 25 women what they believe a good man is. And you know what? You would be amazed. AB, listen, you would be amazed at what I found, right? You would be amazed. Listen, Grogu, you would even be amazed. I know, you'd be amazed. But listen, what if, my friends, a good man wasn't to be defined as something that you are, but what if being a good man is based on something you do. In other words, you guys know I love a good quote, but what makes you good is what you do. What you do determines if you are good. So doing good is being good. Look at the quote. Being a good man is something you do, not something you are. So doing good is then being good. So if I do something good, then quite frankly, women should see me as good. I'm not a good man because of what I say. Did you hear me close, gentlemen? Not just because you say you are a good man makes you a good man, but because of what I do. That's what makes me a good man. So brothers, listen, stop going around here talking about I'm a good black man and I'm the prize when you haven't done anything. And listen, let me add this caveat while I'm at it. I mean, listen, if I'm going to get in trouble, I'm already in trouble. But if I'm going to continue to get in trouble, I might as well get it out in the open, right? So taking care of your children. Listen, fellas, taking care of your children doesn't make you a good man. As my Pastor Nichols used to say, my former pastor used to say, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to take care of your children, and you don't get credit for doing what you're supposed to do. Shout out to Pastor Nichols, just celebrated his 25th anniversary. Shout out to Pastor Nichols. Nevertheless, herein lies another problem. What if the good you show goes unnoticed because of who that good is wrapped up in or being performed by? So what I mean is this. As many of us very well know, women behave differently when one performs or when one person performs a good deed versus when someone else does the exact same thing. Let me go a bit deeper. For example, if I were to pay an attractive woman a compliment, or, for instance, I would open a door for that same woman, then her response could possibly and would possibly be based or made based on her impression of me without me even saying a word. If she found me somewhat attractive, you ain't got to be laughing now. If she found me, that's right, me somewhat attractive, then perhaps her responses would be more inviting and pleasant. But if she did not, perhaps she would ignore my kind act of chivalry. And you know what, fellas? You've got to be okay with that. Now let me pause here for a moment to say this. Let me say something right quick. To all my young brothers out there, listen, guys. Hear me close. You must learn how to handle rejection. Right. You got to learn how to handle rejection. We all have been rejected at some point or another. And you know what we all had to do? Do you know what we all had to do? We all had to learn how to handle it and keep it moving without retaliation. No, we didn't stop and curse anyone out. There's no excuse for a real man retaliating against a woman for rejecting him. And you know what? No, AB, I gotta say it. I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm already in trouble. But listen, anyone who lays a hand on a woman because of her rejection or for any reason for that matter is a punk. That's right, I said it. And in the words of Dr. Umar Johnson, in his words, not mine, it's the video, in his words, not mine, but in the words of Dr. Umar Johnson, in his words, video 1, in the words of Dr. Umar Johnson, we gonna get it right one day. Any day now. But in the words of Dr. Umar Johnson, you shall receive. Go ahead and play the video.
Have to sentence you for 10,000 lashes for conduct unbecoming a black man. So I'm going to have to sentence you for 10,000 lashes for conduct unbecoming a black man.
All right. Let's get back to it. So, in the words of Umar Johnson, anyone who does anything of that nature should receive 100 lashes. Did you hear that? He said 10,000. 10,000 lashes. So, as we take a closer look at what our topic of discussion is concerning women and their wanting or not wanting a good black man, I want to first identify why this matters. Now, this matters to me because if black women and black men are not interested in each other, then our community will suffer as a whole because no one will then want to marry or have children or even build our communities. Children will suffer as the number of single-parent households will increase. And listen, don't take that personally if you are a single parent, because it was not meant to be offensive, but it was only meant in order to fortify my argument in favor of two-parent households. And for obvious reasons, I am fully engaged in helping our communities win, and I believe that relationships help us to do just that. And when I say these things matter, I mean they matter. Let's look at a few statistics, shall we? Now, if you look at this chart here, black marriage in 2021. Look, it shows it there. I know you guys like numbers just like I do. This chart is from blackdemographics.com, but it shows that 85% of black men have a black spouse, while only 8% have a white spouse and only 4% have a Hispanic spouse, and that small number of 3% encompasses all others. AB, who was included in the others? I don't know. Now I find some surprising results when I look at married black women. It shows, at least in this chart, that 93% have a black husband compared to only 4% that have a white husband, or 2% who have a Hispanic husband. So if I were to look at this chart alone, and I'm sure you're looking at it as well, you could confer that black women do want a black man. And you know what? This statistic simply gives me hope. But then there was this statistic, the circuit here, that makes me sound the alarm. It says that there are 556,387 more married black men than married black women. And this is from the census in 2021. Now, did you not know, and I find it very interesting to note that up until 1960, black men were more likely to be married than white men. You wouldn't believe it. You would not believe it. You see it is right there before your very eyes that black men were more likely to be married than white men until 1960. In 2012, the U.S. Census Bureau released a report, that studied the history of marriage in the United States. They discovered something miraculous, I would say, in the statistics when calculating marriage by race. They found that African Americans aged 35 and older were more likely to be married than white Americans from 1890 until sometime again around the 1960s. Not only did they swap places during the 60s, as you can tell by this chart, but in 1980, the number of never married African Americans began a staggering climb from about 10% to more than 25% by 2010, while the percentage remained just over 10% for white men through 2000. Now, what was the reason behind the decline in marriages since the 1960s? Researchers, they are now beginning to understand the reasons behind the decline in black marriages. And one researcher simply responded, "I see economics as key." And with that being said, let's look at another chart here. Earnings and employment. So compared to all men in the United States, black men who worked were less likely to work in occupations that may be considered white collar and were more likely to hold blue collar or service jobs. So only 41%, as you see here in the chart, of working black men held so-called white collar jobs compared to 53% of all men. Nationwide, there are 93 black men with full-time jobs for every 100 black women or black woman with full-time jobs. But that number can vary greatly depending on the location. And again, these charts are from blackdemographics.com. Many of you will recall that Kevin Samuels during many of his shows would often reference a high-value man. And I know you're wondering, why did I bring those numbers up? At the time, like you, I would often wonder when Kevin Samuels would refer to these high-value men, I would wonder why he would mention them when the number of men fitting his description and his requirements would simply not make the cut. Yours truly included. But in all honesty, as I now think about it, I believe his intention was to somehow show how limited these men were. And unfortunately, quite frankly, how delusional it was for many women to think that they would find one or that they would be found by one. Now, I now think his efforts were simply aimed at making women reconsider the options that were more plentiful in hopes of turning them back to these men. The economy, again, was one of the reasons, but it was not the only reason for the decline in marriages in the black community. And you know what? I want to take a few minutes here to shed some light on this as well. I think we need to identify something else that happened back then that I believe led to the erosion of black marriages in America. And that was new social welfare programs and policies. So in an article by Raheem Kura, he explored the impacts on families of regulations in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So in this man in the house rules, right? There was trying to make the explanation to try and explain what was happening when these social welfare programs and policies were being enacted. And he stated that a long and paternalistic history of punitive regulations has dogged social welfare policy. A classic example of this is the man in the house rule enforced throughout the 1960s for welfare recipients, including those in public housing. The quote-unquote man in the house rules sought to enforce social norms about who was morally deserving of welfare. Specifically, the rules prevented adult males from residing with mothers and children who received assistance. The rules sought to ensure only women with children who at the time were expected not to work benefited from welfare. Households with an adult male were viewed as undeserving of assistance because adult males were expected to provide for their families through work. The quote-unquote man in the house rules enforced through highly invasive inspections forced many families, watch this, to choose between maintaining welfare supports and keeping their families intact. The last part is chilling to me, to have to choose between keeping your family intact or accepting welfare support, which is what you needed. And you know what? That's awful. And yet the government proceeded unchallenged. And then in 1965, during the height of the civil rights movement, a White House aide named Patrick Moynihan wrote in a report to President Johnson. And in this report, it was captured in the New York Times, but his report later, again, that was placed in the New York Times, Mr. Moynihan stated that the growing matriarchy was an important cause. Watch this, listen closely. The growing matriarchy was an important cause of poverty among Black Americans. There it is. There it is. The growing matriarchy, meaning single moms, was an I didn't make this up, was an important cause of poverty among Black Americans. Again, I'm not pointing a finger of blame. We all know that there were things that occurred, systemic racism and prejudice and discrimination that occurred that put our people in the worst predicaments. But here it was, this young man made it clear, a White House aide, that this was important. So you know what they did? As they always do to silence him, they accused him of blaming the victims and thereby silence his argument. And my question is, was there any truth to it? Was there any truth? Of course there was. And in 1983, again, 18 years later, half of the Black families were headed by single women. And at that time, 55% of Black babies were born to unmarried mothers. Now that was in 1983. I wonder what that number is today, almost 40 years later. Now, before I go on, it just dawned on me, AB, that James Evans probably wasn't in the home on Good Times. James was not in the home. You know what? They did want to write him off. They wanted to write him off. We've heard the stories. They're just messing up my childhood. But listen, if we were to look at relationships now, as this chart suggests, we can see how this impacted our relationships. So the relationships of Black men, the percentages, of Black men who are married and who have never been married are almost the exact opposite of those percentages for all men in America. So here lies a larger problem. If Black women are determining that there aren't any good Black men out there and they decide not to marry, it will continue to impact our community greatly. So many of us, as Black men, we have also bought into what I consider to be the big lie. The big lie that has been circulated in our community for some time. Now, this lie is that marriage is only of benefit to women alone. And you've heard that. You know, this foolishness has led to countless brothers deciding to forego marriage in favor of remaining single. Now, this big lie has been perpetuated throughout our communities via social media. And watch this, even, you know what, in some magazines, while we're promoting singlehood, single couples, they ain't even married. But we continue to promote single couples having babies. Yeah, they are married, and we continue to promote them. And at the same time, we're causing less interest in marriage. I can prove what I'm talking about. I can prove it. I can prove what I'm talking about. And I must say that before I do this, I have to shout out Corey Holcomb and the 5150 show for giving us some great content, some great entertainment. But we must look at platforms like this for what they are. And that is, they are for our entertainment. Now, the question is, can they sometimes often offer us some nuggets here and there? Certainly they can, and they do. But you must be able to qualify these things before you swallow them whole. So let's look at this.
No! Every man out there who is in a relationship, I want you to be very wise and brave as you evaluate the person who is trying to talk you into getting government paperwork to make the relationship official.
God!
Any woman who's trying to get you to put government paperwork into your relationship is your enemy.
God?
Your enemy. Not, oh, she just wanted this. That is your enemy trying to coerce you into doing something that gives her the upper hand, so when you leave this time, you owe.
God.
Craig, you ain't married, are you?
No.
Marcus, you ain't married, are you?
Absolutely not.
Oh, God.
To the
Nail, you ain't married, are you?
Can't no woman break my heart because I'm going to marry myself.
Abe, you married? These are the younger generations up in here. You know I'm coming back there. We got a brother up in here, good brother, always in good spirits. Used to be a Soul Train dancer. He showed us a picture of back when he was skiing and used to ride them hoes out.
Oh, my God. You don't know if he did that.
Why you doubting him? He trying to say you can't ride hoes out.
I didn't say that. I just said I don't think he was that kind of fella, but...
What do you mean he wasn't that kind of fella? That's all part of being a man. Riding out women that you know wanted to ride your heart out. That's how you become a man. When you fuck the bitch that wanted to destroy you and you look at her while you washing up. Bitch, if you don't shut the fuck up talking to me, that's manhood. Have you ever been married?
He is, isn't
Now
he?
look, D, have you ever seen anything but pleasant out of that brother back there?
Always just in a good mood.
Always.
Very kind.
Soon as you see him, he always a good brother.
Very kind.
Cocaine.
You're not still married, are you? Oh, you still married? God damn. 51 years? Oh,
51 years. I'm like, God.
what'd he say?
15 years. I thought he said 51.
Oh, 15
He's
years.
not even in his
Okay.
50s, is he?
I didn't know that. So he married. Well, look, I'm wrong. There are happy endings in the world.
Right.
Well, it ain't ended yet.
Well, it's 15 years of happiness. He said he ain't never argued. Do you think you will ever be in a situation with a woman
I feel
in
like-
15 years you ain't never argued? Moment. No! Every man out there
Wow. Listen, I forgot to give my disclaimer. I apologize. AB did remind me. But again, shout out to Corey Holcomb. But I, for one, am a fan of the 5150 show. And listen, I'm glad that Corey was able to own his mistake and apologize for painting such a dismal picture of marriage in the black community. As you heard, the young man there said he had been married for 15 years and he was happy. And you listen to the commentary that he offered about his happiness and how jolly and how kind of a fellow the young man was before even knowing that the guy was married. He was coming to work happy. So that goes to show you that oftentimes the picture that is being presented may not be true. We got to go behind the veil, so to speak, and find out the truth. Because you know what? Listen, we are in a state of emergency. And if we don't continue to marry and birth children, our community will not survive. Listen, we've already gone from the largest minority in this country to becoming the second largest with 40.1 million as of 2021. So we also need to address the fact that black marriages also may be more likely to end in divorce because, and this is what I found to be quite saddening, but it's because married black men and women are more likely to view life after a divorce more positively than do whites. Do you understand that? That they're already looking after marriage and looking forward to living in divorce. They have a very positive outlook of divorce. And you know what that reminds me of? Some time ago, I remember speaking with my cousin, this was years ago, concerning one of her girlfriends that was weighing whether or not she would file for divorce or not. And she asked the question of my cousin after she had already asked if the same question of several of her other girlfriends. And the other women had shared the glamorous parts of being single. As far as I can remember, they were at the time all single. And they painted a picture of happiness that was second to none. They showed them on vacation. They talked about their vacations, going out to dinner and having great times with their girlfriends. However, my cousin, who at the time was still grieving over the loss of her father, and she told of her having to return home after burying her father. She had to return home to an empty home, with no one there to embrace her or even a shoulder to lean on or even someone to have some conversation that would take her mind off of her grief. She shared that story with her girlfriend, but wouldn't you know it, her girlfriend still pulled the trigger on the divorce. Yeah, that's what I said. Grogu. She still pulled the trigger on the divorce. You know what? And I believe that she's still single today after doing that. Now, while that may or may not be good for her, it's up to her to make the decision. But what that does tell us, and it kind of shows us that while other races are quick to remarry, even in that, we are deciding that one time is enough. Now, there are those who will stay single, and that's their choice. But there's another thing that I have to address in this discussion. And that is the recent survey that I heard discussed out here in these YouTube and Facebook streets, all right? And that was this. If there were 10 women and there were 10 men, out of that group, only 2 of the 10 men would be having relations or in a relationship, while all 10 of the women would all be having relations or in a relationship or situationship or entanglement. Now, what does that tell you? It tells us this, very simple math. 8 of the men are not being chosen. Why? Are they not good men? Or is there something else? Now, we have all heard the saying, mainly from women, that the guy that I'm looking for, this is women saying this, not me, I'm not looking for a guy. But if you are, to each his own. Don't counsel me. But listen, we've heard this from women. They say that I'm looking for the must-haves, right? And it's the 3 6s. 6 feet, 6-pack, and 6-figure income. Now, for those of you who just joined, we already showed through statistical data that while the first one may or may not be hard to come by, we definitely know that the last one will in our community, right? We know that last one will. So what tends to happen is that all 10 women end up overlapping with the 2 men. So ladies, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And I know the brothers, y'all, look, they're gonna hate me for it, but here it is. Whether you know it or not, you just might be sharing a man. Okay, I said it, I got it out there. This is why we must redefine what we consider to be a good man. And here's where He Spoke Fashion can help both men and women. I'm going to offer the men ways I believe will help you go from the bottom of the list to the top of the list, thereby increasing your chances of being chosen. Are you ready? Here we go. First things first, you must find your purpose. That's it in a nutshell. Finding your purpose. You know, my father would often say there are 2 important times in a man's life. One is when you were born, and the other is when you figure out why you were born. See, when you find the why, thanks, Dad, for that. When you find the why, you find your purpose. Let me say that again. When you find the why, you find your purpose. Now, for those of you who have been unsuccessful in finding your purpose, let me share this quote with you that I believe can help. You know I love a good quote. So this one is from Bishop T.D. Jakes, and it says, if you can't figure out your purpose, figure out your passion. For your passion will lead you right into your purpose. Wow. What are you passionate about? Find your passion, and your passion will lead you right into your purpose. Man, shout out to Bishop T.D. Jakes. Next, I want to tell you, young men, get your career in order. You say, I was raised to believe that you didn't marry a woman until you could afford to take care of her. Now, I know that's a bit old school these days, you know, and that's all right. But I believe that most women, even if she has her own career, doesn't mind if her man has his own and can afford to take care of her. All right? Can afford to take care of her. Now, next, guys, you must maintain your standard of class. Now, this may be difficult for some of you, but there is a standard that you must maintain, and that standard is class. I don't care what things life brings you, but remember to stay classy, my friend. Just stay classy. And then I want you to make sure that you establish your signature style. I said style. Because remember, gentlemen, fashion is what you wear, while style is how you wear it. So if you want to get noticed, and this is how you get noticed. If you want to get noticed by women, you can't simply just grab the latest fashion item and think that is it, right? Fashion, the brands provide tools. Shout out to Justin Wakefield for that tip. Brands, they provide you with tools, but you must make sure your fashion, those tools that the brand provides you with, that your fashion matches your style. And listen, if you don't know what your style is, then simply hire a personal stylist. Now, shameless plug here, check me out at HeSpokeFashionLive.com, as I am now accepting new clients, right? So shameless plug. Now you get that, right? Your style is how you wear it. Some of you have the wherewithal and the means to purchase great brands and luxury brands. But without style, you just simply don't get the attention you deserve. Find you a stylist. And then next, I want you to simply look to increase your value. You know, as many of you may recall, and we've discussed this already, that Kevin Samuels would often reference a high value man, and he would list certain requirements that were applicable to being a high value man. But I want to revise something that Kevin Samuels said concerning this, and I want to offer this instead. Increase your value and be confident that in doing so, you'll be able to attract the right woman for you. See, not a modern woman that only wants a high value man, but a woman who sees the value in you because you have now increased your value. You know, the confidence you will achieve from increasing your value will afford you countless opportunities and options as it pertains to dating and finding the right woman. Kevin Samuels, was he right about women not wanting a good black man? You know, I do believe there was some truth to that. And the reason behind it, in my opinion, was simply miscommunication and that old age adage that said our reputation precedes us. What do I mean by that? What I mean is simply this. Our reputation says that there aren't any good black men out there. And you know what? Some women will continue to repeat it and believe it. But we as men must work to change that. And by all means, fellas, we must stop blaming women. Again, we must stop blaming women. Why? Because you can't have what you speak against. Let me say that again. You can't have what you speak against. Remember that this is the goal. The goal is for you to have a relationship because relationships matter. Marriage matters. Families matter. And lastly, communities matter. Now, just before we end our show tonight, our 100th episode, and listen, I thank you for rocking with us through this journey. We're going to continue to bring you great content as we move throughout this multiverse. But as we close, and before we end our show tonight, I must share our fashion spotlight of the week. This is the point where I hope to show someone who has emerged this week in terms of fashion. Now, this person can be someone in entertainment, or it could be someone that's local, your coworker, your neighbor, your friend. But tonight's fashion spotlight of the week is none other than Miss Nia Long. Miss Nia Long. Now listen, if you are unaware of who Nia Long is, then shame on you. But for now, let's just say that she has shown a level of style and grace that can't be compared simply based on what she has endured recently. Now, to have to see what I would consider to be embarrassed almost, to see her child's father in the way of, you guys know what happened, but to now see her child's father rebound in such a way, I don't know if you heard or not, that he is now the new head coach for the Houston Rockets, or allegedly. Let's say that until the paperwork is signed. But to see that she has to endure that, and now he's rebounding in such a way that will now have many people discussing whether she made the right decision if he is back on the market, because we don't know, right? So right now, for this week, let's hear it for Miss Nia Long, our fashion spotlight of the week. Thank you. And listen. I have really enjoyed you all on tonight. Listen, this is our 100th episode. Again, I'm thankful for everyone who has continued to rock with us along this journey. As we continue to bring you the best in entertainment, the best in fashion content. And you know what? We're trying to build young black men and women. And I think that we're on the right road towards doing that. Again, this is all I have for you tonight. I hope that you enjoyed the show. And listen, I've enjoyed it, and I really hope that you have too. That's all I have for you tonight. Have a good night, good fashion, and remember, he spoke fashion to you. See you next time. Hope you'll join us. Yeah, in the building, 100th episode. Did you hear that, Go Crew? We in the building. Leave your questions and comments, and remember, this is He Spoke Fashion, and I really appreciate you all for watching. Please take time to follow us on Facebook. And if you really like this episode, what you think, leave your questions and comments. And remember, this is He